Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded July 28th, 2021. Good evening, Frank. Good evening, Rod. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to tonight's show.
First of all, you're doing well.
Well,
You is in a good mood. Is in a good mood today. I learned a few things. I've been doing a big Microsoft Defender for Identity project. Learned some pretty cool stuff. So without going into detail, there's a way to create honey tokens, honey tags or such, so that MDI plants them in your environment. And if a script kiddie or amateur comes in, they see this thing, right? And they'll go after it because it looks like it has a default password. You can name it whatever you want. Or you can use an Active Directory account that you create yourself. But when it does, it creates a shell account. And it's obviously fake. Like if you really go look at the attributes of it, it has like a indecipherable SID, GUID. It just looks crazy, right? And like, this can't be real. But what I did not know is that if your customer has a very strict change control process on the way that they allow entities to be created in AD, it cannot override it. It will not show up in AD. Even if you give it an account, like a GSMA account rather than a named account, which is sort of fancy for a service account, even if you do that, it kept failing. They have a GPO, which is pretty slick. I can't mention the customer. Pretty slick. You can only create accounts from certain subnets on certain domain controllers from certain workstations. I'm like, all right now. And so they see these failures. The MDIs lighten up. Who's doing this? Who's doing this? Right? And so they're in a crappy match with the purple team. Purple team's a team, right?
It kind of is, yeah.
They keep firing off Qualys and Tenable and moving all over the VLANs, all over the network. MDI just lighting up. Like, what are you guys doing? Right. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then the other thing I learned was, yeah, that's both of them. What happens when you create a honey token and what happens GPO versus ADM? And I was like, oh, man. And then the other thing I learned today, Rod, you're not an MDI guy, and Frank isn't either. So inside MDI, when you configure one of the sensors, for our users who don't know what it is, MDI is Microsoft Defender for Identity, which is our UBA and anomaly detection product that looks at abnormal behavior when it talks about things around your authentication fabric or someone trying to kill chain you or domain dominate you, right? So anything around authentication, Kerberos, LDAP, all these things. One thing I did not know. So you can go in and you can designate a domain controller / sensor, right? Sensor and domain controller, they're same, right? You put a sensor on it. That sensor actually names itself the domain controller, right? You can configure it to send the logs to a SIM, non-Sentinel, right? You put in all the configuration. What's the IP address? What port? Blah, blah, blah. If the sensor goes offline, then the logs don't go to that and it doesn't report. So I'm going to ping one of you guys' brain on how to, well, you can't even really do it at KQL or write a protection for it because it's on premise, right? But the cool part about what you can do is that if you bring it back up on the sensor, reinstall it back on it, the logs are there. It will come back and do the logs and send it out, right? If you reinstall the sensor on another domain controller, will not send the logs. It doesn't see it like that. And I'm like, I thought the logging was shared and the intelligence. There is no high availability in MDI. When you send it to a non-Microsoft SIM, that sensor is on that. Now you're probably saying, well, Ed, if it's per domain controller, go and configure each domain controller to send the logs. What happens if you do that? duplication. It's sending the same thing, right? So they didn't want to duplicate the effort, but I say you got to sort of think about it. But it was pretty interesting to do that. And there was one more thing that I bumped into that was just a cool. Oh yeah, the whole unified portal is being pushed out globally. Like it started there now. So when they went into their environment, all that stuff was there, even the MDI.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I was gonna. Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask because we have the identity stuff in the security.microsoft.com portal now, right?
yeah,
So,
it's in there. So they didn't know that. Well, they use
oh,
another. They use another CASB. So I say, hey, if you were using our CASB, you're licensed for it. They use something else. MDI sends that telemetry to Microsoft Cloud App Security, and it has a security posture pane. And one of the things it talked about years ago. I saw it. Why are you running a print spool in your domain controllers? It'll show it right there too, right? And they're like, really? I said, yeah, we didn't wait for the print nightmare thing. This has been in there, and it'll go through unneeded services on a domain controller. So that's pretty slick. So I learned a few things today. Customers really good. Can't mention their names just yet. They sort of particular about that. But you guys know what vertical I cover, right? So it's got to be
mhm.
financial institution or so you get it right. What else did I do today? It is hot as a fire ant's butt down here in Georgia.
It's pretty hot here too, but I can imagine it's probably
Well, the
surface of the
crazy part
sun.
about it, man, we had a storm last night, man. We thought we had tornadoes. Warnings going off, trees bending sideways, stuff are down. I mean, it rained. My wife was scared. Lightning struck my neighbor's house across the street, burned
Have
up
you
all
ever
his
have you ever seen a tornado?
several times. Yeah. I'm in the South, man. My wife's from Little Rock. I've
Yeah.
watched a tornado go across, right, and you can hear
Yeah.
it. You hear what you don't hear because there's just a silence at first, and then you just hear this. I'm like, oh, okay, we're about to die.
I actually have to say I've never seen one, but I've kind of been in one. Does that make
I've
sense?
I've been in both. Yep.
So,
Yeah.
when I was younger, like sixth grade, I was looking out our back window. And my mother slams the front door. I turned my head, then I turned back, and really just turned back, and there was a tree pushing against the window, and I could see the glass actually bending in, and
Mm.
so I ran the other way, and the tornado pulled the tree back about 15 yards at the last second before the window was about to shatter. So never really saw the tornado, just saw this big tree going to go in my face. But
Yep.
yeah, it's I was in Florida last week. I did Universal Studios, and so you talk about hot. I have to say, if anybody does Universal Studios other than going to a Microsoft Ignite event and jumping over to Universal Studios, do the Express Pass. That gets you in and out of the rides and keeps you cool between the rides. That's the most important thing.
The important question is, you allow the wives and kids to use the express pass? Because I know Frank's gonna look out for Frank. Poor kids and wives out there just, oh my God, where's Dad?
No. So the trick is that I stay at this one resort that you say, oh, you're staying at a resort, but realistically speaking, if you go to the resort, they give you the express pass.
Yeah.
So if you just stay there for one night, you get the express pass for 2 days. So you're basically paying for the express pass but staying for free, that sort of thing. So that works out really well.
Yeah. When I used to do those things when my kids were little, I would always get it. I really didn't become brave enough to really start riding roller coasters and stuff like that, man, to my early 40s and stuff. I would not get on. I'm like, all right, no, I'm not doing it. And even then, I got on one. You know how they take the picture? I was like, I was like 40. I was so scared. Oh, they rolled me
I wish you bought it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, they rolled me the whole time. So I went and even though the beer is like $20 for a cup of beer, I had like 5 of them and got back on it. And my whole goal was to keep my eyes open the whole time while I was going, right? And then that looked even more crazy. But something snapped in my brain, man. After about 45, I'm like, I'm on the backside of life anyway. I've jumped out of planes, bungee jump, zip. Nothing startles me. So when the lightning struck my neighbor's house yesterday, my wife, we were on the front porch. Our front porch sits sort of deep, so we can sit back from it. And we was watching this rain. And so she asked the question, like, what's that thing that you can do if you can see the lightning strike and then count the seconds you can do the storm? So she did it. And we started counting. And then next thing you know, a bolt of lightning hit the neighbor's backyard. It fried all of his ubiquity equipment and his outside stuff. And the neighbor's next door. He's buying. So I let him a Cisco switch and something else to get him up until he ordered. And I said, hey man, did lightning hit your house? He said, man, mine and both sides. We saw it. And my wife, I never seen her move so fast.
That's scary.
I mean, she must have teleported. She was gone. I looked around like, where'd she go? Golly, I ain't never seen her move that fast. Like, God, dog it. But no, man, that's the life and adventures of mine. So, I'm looking at this blog from this guy called, I don't know, it's Azure Cloud AI blog, Rod Trent 759, right? It's all right. So we can't go through everything.
By the way, before you get started on that, I have a tornado anecdote to share with you. I live in Ohio, right? Because for the longest time that was kind of considered part of Tornado Alley. So when I was a kid in the 70s, we lived in Waynesville where there's this massive tornado that came through. So ever since then, my mom was always afraid of tornadoes. We moved from Waynesville to a town called Centerville where we didn't have a basement. And so we had nowhere to go when there were tornadoes. So what my mom ended up doing was taking my sister and myself when there was bad weather and sticking us in the bathtub. Mm-hmm. And when she thought a tornado was going to come, she was going to jump in on top of us to protect us. And I've been traumatized by that my entire life since.
So that's why you don't take baths?
I don't take baths, and I sure as heck don't let somebody walk up behind me. So
I do. Tornadoes come through Georgia. I like the last major one that I can say that I was there. Remember when they had the Final Four in Atlanta and they ripped the top off the Georgia Dome? I was at that game. I mean, people were screaming, cars throwing all over the place. Like, whoa!
Didn't it like damage like one of the hotels or whatever? Move one of the hotels or something like that. So
I mean, the Omni is next door. I mean,
right.
And the Peachtree Plaza, the huge one that has a thing that certainly someone was filming, and you could see the building.
That's just scary. Yeah.
Right. Mother Nature is not to be trifled with.
No.
Not to be trifled with.
I mean, Microsoft used to have a lot of conferences down there at the Atlanta Conference Center or whatever it is. Yeah. So
the last thing.
It was Tech Ed. I forget what year.
But next to the last Ignite, they gave Atlanta a chance and they didn't come back. Atlanta seems like it's a friendly city for conferences. We're not in big boy status. It's not really friendly like that. It's the smallest big city that you'll ever be in, but it's not really ready for that.
So we couldn't find any guests this week, so we're having Rod on. Is that the deal?
Well, that's not true. So I already have guests lined up for the 4th, the 11th, and the 18th. So we're going to have people come.
I'm kidding. It's as I was on vacation and been very busy with things, Rod's been putting out all these blog posts about enhancements to Sentinel and everything else. I'm like, hey, let's have Rod on as the guest because I want to get caught up with everything that's changed about Sentinel. Mm-hmm. So hopefully he can get us caught up on that. And so
I want to say one more thing.
Go ahead.
And that I don't know. I sent the email out to you and Rob. My certification woes due to Franklin Grimberg.
I was hoping we'd get by this. I was moving to Rod as fast as I possibly could, but no.
I've logged on several times. Like, we can't accommodate your test. Your login is not valid. You fail. I'm like, what am I doing, man? I'm trying to go take this SC200. No. So I finally got my profile back, but now it will not let me register for an exam. And then I'm talking to some colleagues, both external to Microsoft and internal. I talked to 7 people. 5 of them cannot do the SC200 at home. It keeps failing. The one you do at the house. And they were like, they just threw their hands up, which is a big deal because a lot of roles at Microsoft, that is part of their required training now. Yep. You got to get that SC200 taken. Yep. So when I went online and looked at it, I think I talked to you, Franklin, about it, and we'll move on here in a second. They said that they did an update on the 23rd of July. Franklin, he helped me to what they had done. So I haven't really gone and looked at the changes. So I was
Well,
gonna just try to. I was just gonna go try to take it really quick before I take a couple of days off, but I do when I get back.
so I want people to realize that if you take a look at Learn or the learning content that's out there, all that was really developed before the unified portal, number one. And also from a Sentinel standpoint, a lot of functionality has been added into Sentinel since that content was written. I mean, I have an entire list of things that I would change to the SC200, courseware. Even the changes, even more stuff that they're putting into the unified portal right now. Now you have to realize is that learning content can be behind because they basically probably update the SC200 exam every single few months. Okay. So even though the course content was posted back in February, even the Learn modules, right? The exam could actually be updated with current portal functionality, Sentinel functionality right now. So that content is definitely old and will need to be updated now. I think that they normally do it every single 6 months. They do the content refresh. I know that some of the content that they did refresh was around the fact of the unified portal. Now, one of the things that I did in putting together the content, which is a good thing and bad thing, at the time there were separate portals, and if you take a look at the learning paths, there's Defender for Endpoint, and then there's M365 Defender, right, which is the next learning path inside Learn. One of the reasons why those are separated, if you take a look at how you have to develop content for Learn, you have all these parameters that you have to live by. And so I felt that Defender for Endpoint, even though percentage-wise it doesn't show on the skills measured, if you take a look at the amount of content that you have to cover in Defender for Endpoint compared to the other products within inside M365 Defender, I felt that there was that other content. There's things that you don't are too in depth for the class, like, hey, am I going to teach everyone about Active Directory abuse? That covers for Defender for Identity. And if you take a look at Defender for Office, right? This person's not responsible for setting it up. They're responsible for responding to it. So there's a lot more meat in Defender for Endpoint from a response standpoint than the other products, right? So that's why I broke it out. But now that's going to be a problem with the unified portal, because you need to start with the unified portal and then go into those other things. And so it's just specifications around how you design for Learn content. But I think they're still going to keep the in-depth Defender for Endpoint content in there and push like the first module of M365 Defender, so they understand the unified portal, then go into the full Defender for Endpoint, and then also all the other information from there. So there's just some writing specifications for Learn that we have to, parameters that we have to stay in on how you put the content out. But
if I was to do it,
yeah,
I would take the SC200 and make it a SC200, SC201, SC202, and SC203. And then if you take each one of those, gives you an associate, right? And each one of those tests lines up to one of the products. And then if you get all of them, you become what's the end title? Expert, right? And that way, or you can go a little bit backwards. You can take the composite exam. Coming from a Cisco world, I take a lot of composite exams, right? That way you don't have to go do the individual ones. And if you want to take the composite exam, maybe that's the SC200. I mean, I got everything. But if I want to take the individual ones and break it up, because Cisco exams used to cover so much, you could not stay up. Like this is too much information.
So I agree with you. I mean, I already told them, on the Sentinel side, if you take a look at where Sentinel was in December of last year from a functionality standpoint to where it's at today, I told them, I said, listen, I'm writing content. I know some people are not going to be happy about this. I'm just trying to compare functionality wise, right? I told them, I said, listen, you have Sentinel in here for this number of days and time, but I'm telling you right now, functionality wise, when you're going to redo this in 6 months from now, it's going to be functionality difference between Notepad and Word, right? And so I don't even see how they can keep Sentinel in SC200. I think that they might have to at that point in time break Sentinel out into its own, and as M365 Defender expands, I think you could probably keep that as one, and Azure Defender in that grouping. Except they kind of have to do the.
Well, I would make the SC200 unbearably hard. Unbearably hard, meaning you needed to be a 350 and a 400 to pass composite. I would make the other exams and the numbering is whatever it is, 201, 202, 203, 204 to correspond to what products you were testing. And if you get all of those, right, and even if you got to break Sentinel out, if you take the 4 or 5 individual exams, it gets you the same thing as you took the composite exam. I would make the SC200 almost damn near unpassable unless you were good.
So,
and then everybody
no,
takes
I mean,
it.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Think about
I
it.
agree with breaking it out because you can only have a 4-day class basically, right? And Sentinel is getting too big. If you have Sentinel, M365 Defender, and Azure Defender, and learning KQL all on that, it's getting too big for 4 days with running labs. Okay.
Well, let me finish, and we definitely got to get to Rod because I want to at least talk about 3 things here. I would say this. Let's talk about this on another podcast where we just talk about certifications and what makes it 4 things.
But let me finish this.
Go ahead.
So the foundational, like the 900s or whatever, that is Describe or whatever. The consultant, or I forget what they call the different levels. That's really you're using the tools, and then the expert level is really you're the architect. Okay, it's not as hands-on as that middle tier. So you have to know how to bring this together. So basically, if they ever do an SC, let's call it 700, that you have to be the architect, that you're going to have to say, this is how we're going to architect the implementation of security, compliance, and identity all together for an enterprise organization. And I'm hoping that they do that, but they're just taking one step at a time. But we can get on to Rod here. I know.
And I definitely want to take this. I'm going to write this out. Some I'm doing the airplane. I'm going to come up with a testing path.
And I don't think we're going to come up with a solution, because this is a bigger problem than just the training. It's people writing books. It's the silly Gardner report that, was based on testing in October of last year. I mean, it's all of our products, whether it's Sentinel or anything. And I think is what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight is there's a lot of nuanced enhancements, particularly to Sentinel, that literally will release 2 or 3 a week that people don't even know about.
Right. So, I mean, I really compare this to Notepad to Word and functionality, and it's growing. And so how do you keep up with that?
I say that we probably.
If you're taking the exam, you have to understand they're updated like every single few months. So all this new functionality you're seeing in there that's not in the Learn content, you could be tested on. So that's a very important thing. But I still think that the Learn material gives you a great foundation for working with what's changed in there.
But think how much more consumable it is if it's very modular. Like I've said, we can take the SC196, which is MDE, the SC197 MDI, the SC198 MCAS, and the SC199, which is MDO. Each one of those gives you an associate. If you are so brave enough and you take the composite exam, you get the expert right off the bat. Since you two are already experts, you passed. I didn't. But if you do all 4 of those, you don't have to take the 200. You've already done it. But I would make the SC200 hard.
And you get a free sub.
And a free sub. Yes. So that's a great topic. Let's move on. Let's talk about it next time. And Frank, this makes sense, because if you need to update it, it is so modular now that I don't have to update the 200. It's frequently, because if something changes in the 196, I update the 196, right? Or I update, what is 198 MCAS. You become a Microsoft security
And
associate
most
MCAS.
importantly, each product group can pay for each thing that they're having developed from a certification test standpoint and learning material. And that's much easier to deal with billing the product groups for the test. But that's okay. That's a different,
I'm taking this with me.
that's organizational stuff. All right,
God
Rod,
damn it,
what do we
you're
have
a
going on?
genius.
What are the important things that you've written about
Well,
recently?
Edward said that he had something. He wanted 3 things he wanted to talk about. Let's see here.
Yeah, I got 3.
Here's my screen. Oh, sorry about that. Did you see that yet?
No, not yet.
No.
Yes. Rod Trent has started screen.
Oh,
Look at
thanks.
Frank.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That's Frank.
Sorry.
Frank is sitting here pulling my puppet strings. I can't get certified. I can't get registered. It wasn't enough that he erased my I pissed him off. I did something to Frank, and he's like, "I'm gonna get you, Ed. You know, you're not gonna know when, and you're not gonna know how, but I'm gonna get you." And this is what has happened, right? So one thing I want to talk about is that the first thing that you got up here is absolutely. You had known me as long as Frank. I hate best practices. I hate that phrase.
So it is a bad phrase. It is.
It is.
But customers use it more than anyone. That's the only term they understand, I think.
Well, the reason that it sort of got my, I've looked up and I'm like, oh, here we go, is that I reached out to you for help. And I said, hey, man, how can I enable all of these analytic rules without one by one? You're like, oh, you can just call the API, but the documentation is not printed yet. Is that right? So I have no guidance on how to do this. I'm trying, and finally, I'm like, I give up. The time that I'm trying to figure out how to make post commands, this is not working. And then Franklin told me that you told him that you could do it via. How you do it, Frank? It was the way that you said it, Ross said. It wasn't via the API. It was ARM templates. Oh, you knew via the ARM templates.
We had a question about that on our Discord too. So.
Oh yeah, yes and no. So I tried it. Here's the problem with it. You need to have a reference ARM template, right? That has all the analytic rules that are relevant. You can copy that and you can play around with the resource groups. I got some errors. Like, you can't do this because you don't have this LAW. You don't have this and have this. Then you run it. Permissions was killing me. And I threw my hands up. I'm like, and the errors I was getting was so archaic. I mean, not archaic, but just so vague. But eventually, like, it's a permission issue. When you try to do it like this, and you try to deploy this ARM template, even at a resource group level, it is assuming that everything that in that reference template is in place. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, see, that's the issue with ARM templates, particularly for when we deploy things like playbooks and things like that. It would be so super nice if you could just deploy it and then configure it afterwards without having to have some of the, and you can, if the playbook is templatized in that respect. I was going to say correctly, but there's really no correct way to do it. Yeah. So if you templatize it a certain way, then yeah, you don't need any of those variables. You can configure those after the fact, and that's how I prefer it. But like I said, there's no uniform way. I'm so surprised someone has not created a PowerShell script or some app that takes a playbook and removes all the variables and creates a really.
It's going to do it.
All right. Needs to be really neat, really clean. So it's really easy. And at the end of it, say, hey, would you like to deploy it to the Sentinel GitHub repository? And
I'm going to do it. I'm going to get Nathan Swift to help me. Big shout out, Nathan Swift. Yeah, I just volunteered you're doing it. me and Nathan Swift are going to get this done, right?
Yeah.
And because it's needed, because I thought I could manipulate the deploy Azure Sentinel as code or deploy the GitHub repository that allows you to deploy your lab. Yeah, I ran into so many roadblocks, right?
Well, that's what GitHub repositories are for. It's always beta. So
the problem is that it's not that the code is bad. The number one thing across almost 90% of people on GitHub that write their stuff, they don't write a good prerequisite. Do these things and before, and it makes your life easier.
I'm
right?
guilty. Yeah.
Because I was trying to do something with managed identities, and I had to reach out to Matt Lowe. I'm like, dude, oh yeah, what I assumed. I'm reading your stuff step by step, Matt. I don't know what I can't read your brain, man. Oh, now I get it. When I have to go in and substitute these permissions on this GUID for this managed identity, you and Nicholas DeCola didn't say nothing about this. I think it was Nick or somebody that helped him write it. But let's talk about your best practices.
So, yeah, not my best practices. We finally added this stuff to the docs, and literally, if you go through, so we got one for deployment, one for just kind of general Azure Sentinel best practices, but then also for data collection. These are the three areas that customers generally have questions most about. In my previous role, I spent a lot of time with customers, 1-2 hours on the phone, helping them stand up Azure Sentinel from a best practices standpoint. But literally, just like you said, Ed, there's best practices is very, there is no best practice per environment. Every environment is absolutely different. And one best practice may work in one situation and one may not. So there's some guidelines and some recommendations, but I don't think even these are more generally kind of hard coded. Everybody has to do every single thing that's listed here, but at least there's something, because a lot of the stuff, and if you read through these are things that I've written somewhere or I've talked to customers about or recommended to customers, and now they finally showed up on the docs platform. So I think that's pretty awesome.
So big shout out to Natalie Collins. She's a security and compliance guru at Microsoft, right? So we talked about this. So some of the stuff I want to talk about to her, she said, you can't do that. And I say, why not? She said, if you do this and you deploy this, now you got to report on it. What if you deploy this and it manifests something? Like, oh, what? So a lot of organizations, like if I don't detect it, I don't have to report on it. If you put this in and you deploy this wholesale and all of a sudden you believe you have something that is manifested up, you got to report on that now.
Yeah.
You don't get to just say, oh, that's a false positive, right? If you find evidence that someone has done some type of solar winds or supernova or sunburst in your environment, you don't get to suppress that. You got to report it. So you got to be very careful to the point. And I always wonder why you just cannot just do it. Like when you deploy Sentinel, these things are turned on. Can I do that? I thought it was because of billing. Like if someone gets a $10,000 bill one month, your head's on the chopping block. She said, no. If you start gathering, you may have to keep gathering. And if you report, you may have to keep reporting. That's why people love to take these baby steps, which is the reason I helped the customer out, brought it up, make sure I say this right, and then I was told no need for you to be on these meetings anymore because something showed up and they like, you're done. We need to go look at this. We did not know this was going on. It was, and the bad part about it, it wasn't an external threat. That's when they decided you need to go away. You don't need to be part of these meetings anymore, right? So I think there's a need for it, but I can tell you who's already done this. Microsoft partners who are really good at this, but they won't share their secret sauce. Shout out to Critical Start.
Yeah.
I remember when they came into being, Blue Voyant, Guided Security. They don't support the show, but if you're listening, give us some money so we can keep production costs down. They will not share their secret sauce. Like, we've gone through and done this. Why would we give it away? And I'm like, yeah, you got a point.
Yeah.
Got a point. That's IP, right? Because I thought one of the partners that does this did API calls. They were like, we wrote a different way. I said, oh, you Lighthouse. We don't do it that way either. So now I'm scratching my bald head like, well, how are you integrating with the customer's environment? Said, you signed the contract, won't tell you. And I'm like, oh, okay. But hey, it's three of us. I'm sure we can figure it out. I mean, Franklin has two brains. You know, he has to. He has two big heads of hair with that big part right here, the big head of hair, right? Now, this right here is, oddly enough, is the second thing I want to know. I have no idea what this is.
So this is brand new. This is query packs. This is not specific to Azure Sentinel. This is a feature for log analytics workspaces. but it works out great for Azure Sentinel in that there's several ways for you to save your queries, right? For Azure Sentinel. So you can go in the logs blade, run a query. What was the last one that I ran here? Let's see, security alert. So I can run this query. Let's see, I should get something back here. Yeah, I should definitely get something back here. Run this query based on the results. I can save my query till later, save it as a function or save it as a log analytics query, give it a name, stuff like that. So I can save my queries. A lot of customers, though, they tend not to save queries. What they end up doing is, if you go back in this logs blade, down here, there's the history of all the queries that you've run over a certain period of time. But even though 90 days is the retention for log analytics workspace for Azure Sentinel, the history of these queries down here are only retained for 30 days. Right. So customers are like, well, I know I ran this. I can't find it. Obviously, those will stack up. Very difficult to find those. You can search through it if you want to do that. But what query packs actually do for you is give you the ability to save a bunch of queries into a single pack. There's a default query pack that gets created, or you can save them into your own. Let me open this up. Save them into your own special query pack, if you want to name it based on your organization or whatever. But these are retained literally forever, as long as you want to store these queries. The other cool thing about the query packs is that, and I hate to say this after our earlier discussion, they are ARM template deployable. But these do work, and they work well. So it's a really neat way to be able to save your queries and save them, and it costs nothing. There's no cost to saving the using query packs.
You know that big shout out once again to Nathan Swift. Come on to the show, man. Make sure you're all right. He did 80% of the work when we wrote a PowerShell script that downloads all the queries you've ever run and saved. And then I came back and finished it up and figured out a way to re-import them. So if you go back to your environment really quick, your Sentinel environment, and you go over to queries to the right, all the way up to the right, Query Explorer.
My bad. Yeah.
No, Query Explorer.
Oh, all right. And there we go.
I have a PowerShell script that would download all of these into a text file. And I figured out how to re-import them.
Oh,
I can take all the queries that you have here, download them to a text file, and then we have another query that runs. We'll import them back into anybody's environment.
So is that a PowerShell module? So
PowerShell, Azure PowerShell.
It's on your GitHub repo.
It's not my GitHub repo is embarrassing because I don't put a lot of stuff there. I will send you. Frank has it.
That's awesome.
Frank's laughing because I was supposed to put it in there months ago. I just never did, but I've refined it, cleaned it up. And so it comes out in text files, and it's really cool. So that when I'm working with a customer that says, man, that's a cool query, rather than me have to do one, copy, paste, do all this, or try to send them a JSON, text file, they take it, now they have it as a reference. So what I was trying to do is write this so I could do the same thing with playbooks. Right. And, work gets in the way of it. But I'll share that with you. That it's actually pretty slick. It's you run it and every query over there. And so if I have a customer, I can't name some of them. Some of our customers for Sentinel they got a lot of cool queries. I was like, I want that, right? Even though if I'm not running that product, if I ever had to run that product, this is so cool, right? And sometimes you'll get queries that are literally this thick in real life. Who wants to rewrite that? But when you have it, you can go in and change it. So I can definitely get that to you. But I think that complements.
Oh, it does, absolutely. Every single query I've ever written, well, not every, most of them are out here in my GitHub repo.
Yeah, maybe I just send mine to your GitHub repo.
And really, I should save them here, but I don't. So I think there are a lot of customers that do that as well.
And I did something else. So if you go back to your Query Explorer, I was following someone's blog post, maybe Nicholas or somebody. You saw if you go down solution queries,
Yeah.
I have a bunch that say hunting. I don't know where they came from. I did something one day because Frank was embarrassing me about going through and finishing up my lab experiments. I There it is, right there.
Mine's under
Yes,
Yeah.
and it just showed up. I'm like, when did I do that? So there is a way, and I forget the MVP that did it. So if you go to the left, the hunting, he figured out a way to take all of those, it's got to be similar to the PowerShell command that I did, and
Yeah.
he exported all of these. Surely did. And I'm gonna ask a dumb question before we go forward into the next thing. You see where it says 183 active and 210?
Yeah.
Is the 210 the default or 210 a combination what Microsoft has deployed within this by virtue of turning on Sentinel plus your custom? Why is 183 different from 210?
That's a very good question that I don't have an answer for. But you can't click on it either.
You can't.
That's a good question. So there's my result. So this, I know what that is.
Yeah.
Active versus total. So, well, I guess some are disabled, right?
No. No query is disabled.
Well, I'll have to figure that out. I don't know that answer.
I've been beating on that all week, and every time I think I found the answer, I'm like, oh, yeah, some custom ones.
Yeah.
Nope, the customers are included in the active.
And by the way, on that last piece there, the query packs, they're not very easy to find. If you want to, after you save them, want to use them again, you have to change it to query type, and your query pack queries actually show up there. It's the only way for you to find them.
Learned something today. That's just been a day of learning.
It's awesome. Let's see.
This one,
yeah.
I can see why it's functional.
Well, this one was specific for that mosaic loader that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I find somebody doing this, you're wrapped across the knuckles, right?
Yeah, and you'll see. A lot of times I blog about some of the hot, reported threats of the day, and I'm not creating things like our Mystic group. I'm not creating the end-all be-all query, but I'm trying to at least expose to customers that they can do this stuff themselves. They shouldn't, if because any security tool like this, where we're capturing data from log files and there's something brand new that's been reported, might potentially be 0 day in the wild. There's probably within the first 12 hours of that thing being reported, there's probably not going to be any threat intelligence or anything fed back into the system to look for it. Azure Sentinel is absolutely valuable in this respect, in that customers can go look for that stuff themselves as long as they have the IOCs. And when Microsoft and other vendors release the CVEs and things for these threats, the IOCs are built in there, right? And it's very easy to create a query. So I just literally, a lot of times I'm writing blog posts to give customers a head start on whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, it seems to be about a 2-day lag in MDE from a major CVE to where you can see it in threat analytics, right? Threat analysis, you see it inside MDE portal. It's about a 2-day lag. They do it. They may blog about it, but until it shows up in the MDE portal where they see the IOC and they talk about it, which corresponds to the public posting of it. It takes a minute, but I can see that there.
So here's something that might interest you and listeners. In this new role that I took or started this week with Microsoft, one of my first tasks is to write a story about those threat signals, how they start, and then how they end up in customers in our tools. So got a few different ideas, like farm to table type of idea, or taking that old Jurassic Park scene where they're talking about the DNA and the cartoon and all that stuff and doing something similar to our threat signals. Because we literally every day, because of the products that our customers use, Office 365, things like this, we collect literally trillions of signals of information every day. Obviously, a small percentage of those are potential threats or turn out to be potential threats, but those things are taken from those signals, they're developed internally, and then they're eventually fed back into all of our security products, right? And a lot of times customers are like, well, how does that happen? Why isn't it quicker? What's the process? Because there is a very defined process that this goes through to make sure that whatever comes from Microsoft is going to be workable and is going to do the job.
So why are people not just utilizing the, hooking up threat intel feeds with the connector and firing that off? And because there, you have threat intel feeds that are not going to go through the process that Microsoft's going to go through. So you can just hook up to one of those and find those IOCs.
Yeah,
Answers?
I think, and to be honest, I just don't think we put enough effort behind educating customers about these two things right here, our platforms and our taxi services. So if I go into, for example, this one, once it refreshes, I use the anomaly, the limo stuff. I don't know if you guys use that or not. I literally have phishing, ransomware, and everything that gets fed back into Azure Sentinel here. So I use it.
And this is a lab in the SC200 course, by the way, is to set this up. So.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
And I was about to tell you the reason that you don't is because what Rod, and it's we have to quit assuming, three of us, that this stuff is easy.
Yeah.
And the second thing, yes, is not all of these fees are free.
Well, this one is. That's why I use it.
I pull all my hair out trying to get a MISP server set up to defeat the SIM. I'm like, oh my God, it can't be this hard, right? And I'm like, well, maybe I'll get Frank to show me how to do this, because I was beating my head against it. But I can get a guest on. She's really good. Well, she sort of moved on away from this now because she likes Defender for IoT. But she's really good at this. Maybe to come on and talk about why you should at least turn on somebody's threat feed, right?
But yeah, and see, that's the idea here, because there's so many really good, potentially trusted sources of threat intel out there, these threat feeds. A lot of them are crowdsourced, and they help fill gaps until there is formal threat intelligence from whatever vendor it happens to be, right? So that's why you should use this stuff. I mean, it's available, it's out there. I know that customers that have used SIEMs, right? Not Azure Sentinel, but other SIEMs, they've built kind of their trusted list of third-party resources for that. And there's no reason why they can't just bring that same stuff into Azure Sentinel, because you can. I think.
Well, let me be a cynic.
Yeah.
Right. How reliable is it? What if I mistype a hash key?
How reliable?
It's only as good as the feed that you get, right?
It is. But the more you have, the more the greater your chances of success are, I believe.
And remember, you can build your own watch list by using external data.
Yeah, I knew
drop
that
the
was
files
I
out there in blob storage to read that stuff in, just to let you know.
Yeah.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah, but
well, and it's funny you mentioned that, Frank, because somebody internally today asked me, said, "Hey, the threat intelligence." Somebody's actually talking about it. Threat intelligence customers want to know if they can import some manual TI. They have a CSV or whatever. And I said, yeah, they can import it into a watch list and use that as a TI. Because right now there's no way to import manually into. I mean, you can create your own one-offs here, right? You can create a one-off IP address, a one-off domain if you want to do it that way. You can't create a range.
You can use the API to do this, and it's pretty straightforward.
You can, yeah. But if they've got a CSV that they want, they have everything listed there, then you have to.
Then you just put it out in the blob storage and use the external data and go from there in KQL.
Yep.
Don't all the major security vendors, like Palo Alto has his own TI feed. Splunk does too, right? Sumo does.
Yeah.
They have their own TI feed. Cisco has one. I saw one the other day. I didn't realize they had it.
They all have it, but the problem is, how much data it is, and how far back should you go versus when Microsoft's own services are going to be getting that TI data, right? So I should say indicators, when they get those indicators in. So if you want to load up all of the data into the database, quote unquote, that's going to take up a lot of space. So getting those feeds from most current stuff, then assuming, hey, over this 2-week period is going to take for Microsoft to get it into their own, through their process or whatever, and then worry about the newer indicators.
And in general, it doesn't take Microsoft a whole lot of time. I'll give them credit for that. Even both vulnerabilities associated to the products that they make, or either other people, it doesn't take long, right?
All right. So there's things that I saw from Rod about extended functionality and new analytic rule types and some other things that I wanted to see. I know that you're running up against the time there.
Go ahead. I'm good.
Yeah, so there are some TI threat analytics, threat intelligence.
He's turned on every
So
analytic rule they
there
make.
used to be, when I wrote the courseware, there used to be 4. Go back to the rule types. There used to be 4 of them. Now, how many are there?
So we got the original.
There's 6.
We got the original, the schedule, the fusion, then the Microsoft security. Now we have
ML behavior analytics was there before.
Yeah.
So the threat intelligence and the anomaly are the 2 new rule types.
Yeah.
So what are those 2?
So the threat intelligence analytics rule is taking the TI that's fed in and then correlating it with all the 3 sources: the syslog, the DNS logs, and there's one other. Oh my goodness. I forget the. I blanked. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. But it correlates that data. So it's an analytics rule that literally runs against just those 3. There's going to be sources added in the future, but just those 3 right now.
You have every active rule. How many rule templates are you? Got 235 running, right?
So what's the anomaly rule type?
The anomaly rule type is interesting in that it's literally just anomalies, spikes in data. But we're trying to kind of prepackage some of this stuff, right? Attempted user account brute force. Yeah, absolutely. You could have written this yourself. But a lot of these are going to provide that instant.
But how is this different than just a scheduled query?
Well, it looks like it's time for a renaming. So rather than Yuba, it's probably Uba, entity behavior, anomaly detection, because everything may not be associated to someone acting crazy. It could be that this thing is acting out of character. So as I went through and started playing with some of these rules, I'm like, okay, I can see this, right? And so if another feed is saying that this is happening because they see it, this is a take the U off Yuba and just goes, this is anomaly behavior because we as a security vendor see this type of stuff that's coming across our intelligent engine, and we will feed this to you if you have this product to be able to do it. And if you have it here, there must be a KQL query that you can write to be able to go see against it, right? So I started playing with some of these. I haven't turned them on because I don't run Palo Alto. So first thing that I do, I sort by data source type, and if it doesn't say security events in it,
yeah, can you hit next back on that screen there?
Yeah. Yeah, and so
so you don't create the alerts here. So no. What's under review and create? So an anomaly will do what? What is the output of this?
Well, see, there it is right there. This is looking at, well, I can read it, right? 4625 on account for 21 days. So now you're saying behavior over a set time limit, right? And being able to do this.
So I understand the query, but the question becomes, what is this outputting to? Is this becoming an incident in alerts, or where is this going? I don't know where this is going.
This
Well,
What is the end game for
it's,
this?
it's collecting a bucket of alerts just like an incident does, and it creates an incident in the system.
does
Okay.
it
Yeah.
create an incident? I thought it didn't because the severity was informational. So that's probably why mine's not creating incidents. I went and did something that says if it's not a medium or high, don't create an incident. Write that down. You know that.
The other interesting thing about these is that you can set it in test mode, right?
They call it flighting. Is that a avionic term?
Yeah,
Like,
flighting or
oh.
production.
So you see what it says severity? Informational?
This
Right
one,
there where you are? Yeah,
yeah,
go down. Click on it. See how you can change it?
yeah.
Yeah.
You can change it if you duplicate it, and you can modify it.
Yeah, you gotta create your own rule, right?
Yeah.
But it's for you to grab all of this information. And Frank, I'm surprised you ain't jumped on this. This type of query builds a huge repository for you to go do your threat hunting. Huge amount. It's all informational. So if you can go in and start writing hunting queries for patterns, you can find it. Because each one of them may have a different data source that's feeding into what that anomaly may be. And so now you have this huge swash of 15 different people saying the same thing, but I see it from a different way. Write a query against it and see
So
what
when you
happens.
say create at the top right now, it has different types now at the top. Go up. No,
Go
go
back,
back
go
to,
back one.
yeah. Click
Yeah.
on create, pull down on the caret there. So
Still just the two.
So these don't create. It won't create incidents in
you
my
duplicate
environment.
there. Okay.
You duplicate it, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, that's
And
how
then
you
you
do
can
it.
modify it. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So has anything changed in scheduled queries?
Let's see. Since last time, maybe.
Hey, can you do something really quick?
I'm really quick, yeah.
You see where it says export?
Oh, you haven't seen that? Yeah.
Oh,
I can actually go in and hold on a sec. I can select all of these if I want and do an export. And guess what? I can also do an import. It creates a JSON file, and then if I want to import, I can import my queries.
solves my problem. I don't need to go crawling an API now or trying to write some type of. Oh, okay. What's that export look like?
Let's see. Here we go. Just a standard JSON. Oh no, I should open it in Notepad. Sorry.
Well, I'm in VS Code. I can see VS Code.
Visual Studio is opening up.
Oh, you still use that thing? You surprised didn't crash your PC.
It does every time. I'm just waiting for it. Here you go. Here's a JSON for that.
Cool.
Oh,
and then I can do a search based on a field type and replace the resource group subscription and everything. I just was not paying attention. This solves my problem.
Well, I mean, this is the thing that people have to be worried about when they go take their exams, right? You got to pay attention to every single detail on the screen, and if it's not in the current learn material or docs, I mean, or it's not, you need to know these things.
You know, if I was part of engineering, just me at Sentinel, if you were to deploy Sentinel, I would deploy a default LAW. They had a generic name that was created by virtue of your tenant name, whatever it may be. You get one that's created for you, right? Instead of saving a lot of your workbooks, notebooks, and a lot of configurations, those are saved in the LAW, a configuration LAW. So now if I make changes, I can make changes in that, and it propagates out to my environment. And then you alleviate customer concern by saying, because this is only holding configuration data, there's no charge for it. I don't care how large it gets, as long as you're not putting logs in it. And that way, if I'm able to have a configuration LAW, all of this stuff resides in there.
Yeah.
And there is a back ass way to do it. Excuse my language for our listeners. But if you miss one thing, a guy that used to be at Microsoft, Adrian Corona, helped me to this. That would be a great feature. You get a default LAW, the same way that Azure Security Center does. Right. But this is only holding configuration data. So now that JSON would automatically have the pertinent information of the tenant, subscription, resource group, and then maybe have a thing that says if you put it here, it's all, write that down too, man. Rod is just a wealth of information today, right?
Well,
He should.
and this is the thing, because the product group, they write blog posts about major feature releases, but they never talk about these little dinky little things that actually provide a lot of value, like exporting the analytics rules, or even just this one, which is an efficiency thing. Now, when you choose your assignment list, it shows the most recent, keeps a cache of the most recent analyst that you assign it to, instead of showing you the absolute entire list like you used to and have to sift through it and figure out who to assign it to. This is why my weekly Azure Sentinel newsletter is so popular, because people want to know this stuff, but it's hard to find it.
And the crazy part about it, if you don't work at Microsoft, you won't get this. You just will not get it. It's because the product group solved the problem. 50% is it makes their life easier because they're trying to do something, and maybe the other 50 is because of feedback from customers that say, hey, you need to do this. But I tell you what, the export the analytic rules of what I'm trying to do, and if I can get it to work, we'll talk about it on podcast. That's going to help. And this is probably what, I'm sorry. This is probably what these Microsoft partners who fancy themselves MSSPs for Sentinel, they're having to write this stuff. They're having to figure this out, right? And it's like, who do you have on? What was your buddy from Texas? Jen? We had on the podcast early in the year, who wrote the ability to use.
Yeah,
Gene. Remember, he had wrote that whole thing about using Teams as a war room, and the next thing you know,
Teams is integrated. Yeah,
it's a solution now.
Yeah,
right. You can go to Sentinel solution.
Right. So let's finalize. Let's run down the list here. Anything else in your blogs there that?
Anything else super important? There's the query pack stuff. Another way to retain your log file or your queries, there's LA query logs table that you can utilize that keeps all 90 days, because it's a table of your queries, but it's not enabled by default. You have to go in and actually enable that. Otherwise, you don't get to use it.
You can do this with an Azure function, right?
Yeah. This was recent. That's absolutely important. The old Azure Defender data connector, you used to go in there and just click, hey, let's connect this. And nobody ever said anything. I just happened to go in there one day and notice that there's now a new option in there to enable the bidirectional sync in that original data connector. They didn't create a new data connector. They just literally snuck this in there. I guess
I'm doing it right now.
Hoping somebody would
on the UI, you can jump out to the unified portal for M365 Defender. And the UI, do you have the same thing going out to the Azure Defender side?
Let's see. You mean endpoint?
Yeah, so if you go to an incident created with inside Sentinel, that's coming from Defender.
Oh, you're going to hate me. I just deleted.
You got to uncheck that box, right?
I just deleted a bunch of them today. So I deleted past that. Let me go back 90 days.
Where's your view? I have something in mind that says I can go back and specifically look at closed incidents.
Well, I can do that too, but I'm going to.
Your view is different from mine.
Find an open one. So there's Defender. This one may be closed. I'm not sure. We'll see. But yeah, I can go directly into investigate Azure Defender. Yeah.
Like you can in M365.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm doing mine right now. I'm going to turn that on.
Because of that bidirectional sync, you doesn't matter which one you close it out in, it will sync and close it out in both of them.
It doesn't do it for MCAS.
One thing that customers asked right away was, okay, so I'm making all these adjustments. I'm putting some stuff in the comments. When it syncs, do the comments that I put in Azure Sentinel or any of the other contexts that I have, does it get synced into Security Center Alert? And it absolutely does not. So it's just closing.
What entities are brought across? Just the hosts, or how is that broken out when you're inside the incident?
Yeah, so just I have a host name that came through. Defender detected some login issues. If I go in here, and we'll go in the same one, it's literally just the same entity. There's nothing else. Unless I go in, of course, and do some hunting and create some bookmarks to add some additional context here. If I happen to identify through hunting that something similar was going on or something related, I can add the IP addresses and other host names and user accounts and stuff like that here. So
I'd be interested to see all the different types of entities that are sent across from Azure Defender. That would be cool to see.
Yeah,
I don't know if they have that.
Because
you're just going off a host. You're not going off of any of the other services, right? Like
right.
a storage incident or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't. Most of my Defender stuff is suspicious authentication because I do that on purpose.
Right.
There's MCAS. Well, we don't sync with that yet. We don't sync.
Yeah, we don't. Oh, yeah, I see it here now. Bidirectional sync is in preview.
All right, so what else do you have on your blog there for running?
We're
I don't
running
want to get
short.
Edward in any trouble there.
Let's see, SolarWinds, Revel. Let's see, some other stuff. We do have the data connectors or the Logic App connectors for the watch lists are functional now. They didn't used to be. So those work extremely well. In fact, it's awesome because if you identify, you've captured an actual administrator account in an incident and you run this playbook, it's automatically going to add them to a watch list so that it won't capture them next time. This is something I did recently. I don't know if you saw this, but I have those LifeX light bulbs in my office.
Right.
And if it's a medium severity incident, I get my lamp goes off 10 times and it flashes orange. If it's high severity, it flashes red.
Nice.
So I'll be and my office is down the hallway from my bedroom, and you can actually see these lights at night if I get an incident during the nighttime hours. So actually, that's about it there. I mean, there's other stuff out here, but we're going back almost a month now. So
let me tell you something that's cool. We'll close out.
All right.
I'm the data connector number has increased also. So Netscope is probably the number one competitor is CASB, and there is a Netscope data connector. So Netscope is a competitor to Cloud App Security. It's in there now. And gotta give you credit when it's due. Netscope is really good. The only thing they have to overcome is their agent. They want you to put agent because they don't have a directory, right? You don't have that directory that automatically ties that when a person logs in, I can see what they're doing. So now you have to put these agents, right? Netscope is pretty good as far as a new data connector, and I do not know what NXLog is. It says NXLogs BSM Mac. I don't know what that is. Oh, Sun still around?
Where are you looking at that?
I'm inside the data connector. Sun's in here.
Oh, so don't. Data connectors are cool, but we have that solutions in preview. That solutions blade. That is the future of data connectors.
Yeah, and it's getting bigger.
Yeah.
There are some bugs in it. Let me tell you what the bugs are.
Yeah.
Bugs are if you're relying on the third party to do their due diligence and make it's not truly one click. I was playing with the checkpoint one. I could not get the solution to work. I went through the data connector, the manual steps, and it worked like a charm. And I was trying to I don't have two environments to say, okay, I did it here, I did it here, I did it here, I did it here. What's going on, right? And I finally threw my hands up and say, if I can do it in data connectors, and I know this better. But what I like about it, the solutions, yeah, the Sentinel for Teams is there, EPO, Core Light. I had a major customer that was bringing, they went from 10 terabytes a day. Imagine the industry that you need to be able to bring that much.
That's awesome.
Hey Rod, can you drop the URL to your blog in the chat and Twitch?
Yeah. Info blocks.
Yeah.
And here's something else they need to do. This will strike home with Frank. We'll close this out. I got a problem with you as a solution, and when you won't tell me if your solution costs or is it free. Because some of them say, "Oh, this is free," and some of them like they don't say anything. Then you get the big payoff at the end. This is going to cost you, right? They got SQL in here, firewall, Ubiquity, something I've never heard of since Seva. Proofpoint.
All right, Rod, to finish this out, what's your number one deployment now? Is it MDO, MDE, MDI, MCAS? To see where you're at this quarter.
My number one deployment.
He's an Azure guy. He don't do none of the other stuff.
The deployment of the day has to be, or let's just say deployment of the recent month or so. It has to be MDI. Because it gets our customers using more cloud eventually.
You can tell I'm a fair weather fan and bandwagger. You know, if you just said MCAS, I'd be like, yeah. But I've been doing so much MDI work lately.
Yeah. Well,
a lot of it, right? I got another project to help out on when they come back. A major customer's like, and I tell you what it is, and we'll definitely close out 712. The number one reason that people are overcoming their adversity are putting something on their domain controllers. When you stop calling it an agent and you call it a sensor, the whole world changed. Because nobody said, what, another agent on my endpoint, on my domain controller? But if you call it a sensor, which one sounds more polarizing? Global warming or climate change? Yeah, people can digest climate change. It sounds more intelligent. But if you say global warming, there is no such thing as global warming. You went down here in Atlanta last night.
Yeah.
You weren't here. I never get nervous doing storms. I'm like, I do not want a tree to fall on my house. Please don't let a tree fall on my house. I don't want that to happen, right? But hey, I'm looking at the Azure Sentinel pricing. It's finally showing up in mine. You know, since my lab is so robust, I'm going to go ahead and sign up for the 5 terabytes a day.
Please do.
Hey man, it's good, Rod. You are either a first-time father-in-law or multiple father-in-law. You just married that boy off, right?
My youngest son gets married in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks. Yeah.
I mean,
that's scary.
Yeah, and then kids and
I'm a granddad. So yeah.
Man, this has been a good one. Next week we will have someone on talking about the relationship between Azure Sentinel and Azure Security Center. And I warned him what Frank was going to do. We're going to see if they take heed. I said, I'm going to tell you guys what he's going to do. You better have your ducks in order. It's going to be 2 guests at the same time. Big shout out to Tom Quinn. Big shout out to Michelle Jackman, coming from the Microsoft GBB team that cover Azure Defender for servers. And they're going to come in and they're going to
super awesome
enlighten us. And then 2 weeks after that, we're going to have Chai, and she is going to come. She loves Rod to death. And we're going to talk about Juniper notebooks or Azure notebooks that relate to hunting.
I think that's going to be at a different time, isn't it? I think it starts early, right?
It starts earlier. I wrote it down somewhere because of the time zone thing. But she said, yeah, I'm excited to come on, right? Yeah. And that's it. So, guys, I am going to take me a few days off. I'm going to go relax. Maybe one day they'll let me rest it for exam. Maybe not. We'll see what happens. All right. But, hey, SC196 MDE, SC197 MDI, SC198 MCAS, SC199 MDO, or hypothetically, you should take the SC200, which is a composite exam. To our listeners, that doesn't really exist. I am proposing that we break up this exam because the stuff that Frank wrote is too hard. That's why the system keeps crashing. Nobody can get through the damn questions. It's crashing the system.
All right.
And a
All right.
coupon for a
Until
free
next
card.
week.
Until next week.